Hi, and welcome to this lecture on learning intents and success criteria. Now, these two concepts go by a whole variety of names, so you might have heard them called learning objectives or course objectives. I'm going to introduce you to the acronyms of WALTs and WILFs because that is some common terminology which is used out in schools. So within this lecture, we're going to not only describe the function of WALTs and WILFs, but we'll also have some practice at constructing some, okay? So let's keep going, okay? Now, WALTs and WILFs are acronyms for what we call up in the real world, learning objectives and success criteria, okay? Now, when I go and visit schools, I'm very fond of taking photos of what is on walls. Now, and if you wander into pretty much any classroom within Queensland, you'll see that on the board there is a space for the teacher to write the learning intention and success criteria. These guys call it learning intention and success criteria. Up here you can see the usage of WALT, which is we are learning to. Okay, these guys call it learning intent. The point is that this is a real world practice that teachers are expected to do, and writing success criteria and learning intent is hard baked into schools' pedagogical frameworks, and it's mandated in some schools and it's optional in others. In terms of being prepared for the field, it is a very, very good idea to be able to write good learning objectives and success criteria, because that's what your mentors will be expecting when you're out there, okay? Now, in terms of evidence of do these things actually work, when we look at the work of Hattie, who pretty much did a whole bunch of meta-analyses, calculating effect sizes, and then mapped effect sizes to the amount of educational gain that students can expect, and then he ranked a whole bunch, you can see that the principles that we are looking at of setting clear expectations, of defining those expectations, is supported by the literature, okay? So you've got some cognitive task analysis, which is fairly high, and that's making sure that students are aware of the cognitive tasks that they're undertaking. Teacher clarity also plays into this, so the more clear you are in terms of your expectations has a positive effect on student learning, and also setting learning goals, okay? So all the practices that we are going to look at today is supported by the literature. Now, having said that, Hattie's work has been called into question, and it is not 100% perfect, but it is a step in the right direction, and it indicates that these ideas do have a positive effect, okay? So let's talk about learning objectives and intents or intentions. Potato, potato, they are all the same thing. Now, the framing that I actually prefer are WALTs, because it reframes it as we are learning to. So there's a couple of reasons for this. The we indicates that this is a communal affair. We are doing this together, okay? Learning to then indicates that the next thing that occurs in that sentence is a verb. And cognitive verbs are absolutely important for teaching. You can see on the wall here, these are posters which have been put out by the QCAA, because in terms of the external assessment for senior, the verbs, cognitive verbs, have a clear definition, and that is what is being assessed within tests. So we do it in senior school, and then we replicate that in the junior school. So when we're writing standalone intents, we always start with a cognitive verb. You'll notice that every single lecture within this course is topped and tailed by the learning objectives, and what I've done is I've bolded, I've put in red the cognitive verb. Those cognitive verbs you can get from this link here. There's also links in the readings for the course. Download that document, inhale, internalize the definitions of the cognitive verbs. Okay? So for examples of good learning objectives, just look at any of the lecture PowerPoints for this course because you'll see them at the start and at the end. Now, where the magic really happens is that once we've defined the skill that we're going to do, analyze, describe, evaluate, create, whatever the cognitive verb is, we then need to set the definition of success, and that's what success criteria do. They define the criteria which define success within that particular skill. So when we go back to Hattie's work, we can see that, yes, being clear with the students about what it means to be successful in this class with this particular learning objective is clearly stated, okay? So definitely have it written, but also to be read from the student's perspective, okay? So whenever I write success criteria, I'm writing it from the student's perspective because it is a tool to increase student agency in being able to self-evaluate their level of learning. So it's less about external evaluation of how successful a student has been, but it's putting the onus back on the student, and this is what we call student-centeredness, to be able to self-evaluate where they are currently and where they are moving to. Now, when I talk about success criteria, I talk about the ThreeStar wheel system. So I touched upon this in the constructivism lecture way back in week 1. Now we're picking it up because this is where we apply that idea. Okay, so you can see there's some points that I've already talked about, but let's have a look at 2 examples. So back in the constructivism lecture, I talked about the 3-star system, where the 2-star is what we would expect for the majority of students within that class, okay? So if the students push themselves a bit harder, they can go through a 3-star, but if they're coasting, then that achievement level is defined by the 1-star. So the 1-star is what you think the students are currently capable of doing. Push themselves, should be able to get a 2-star. Push themselves a little bit harder, they should be able to get 3 stars. Okay? Now, if you have a look at the framing here, I've got there, by the end of the lesson, I have. So it's written first person from the student's perspective. So once they've done the work or while they are working, they can self-evaluate. Okay? Now, the first row there is an example where the success is purely defined by the quantity. So we're going from 5 to 7 to 9. So in my thinking, majority of students should be able to do 7 problems if they push themselves, 9 if they try a bit harder, 5 which is my assessment of their current ability. What you've also noticed is that I've also got noted in there that they need to be completed and marked. So if there is a quality element to the work, then that's the way that you can build it in. That second example on a row, these are 2 separate examples, not used together. Okay? The second example here, what you'll notice is down in the 1-star, I've got there with assistance. Now remember, this is about scaffolding students. So in my mind, if I help students, students should be able to complete this with assistance, okay? And then you can see there, they should be able to complete a row by themselves. So the thinking behind that is give more dedicated support, provide examples, think out loud with the student, and then but still give them an opportunity to be able to display the skill independently. You'll notice that the 2-star, same thing, defines the quantity. There's solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. And you'll notice that students there are expected to complete them by themselves. And over here in the 3-star, not only do they do the work that everybody else should be able to do, but they'll go above and beyond and create a new row and look at another state of matter. So there are 2 examples of how you can scaffold and structure success criteria so that students can self-evaluate at any point. Now, extra bonus that if you do this regularly enough with enough tasks in your class, what I recommend that you do is that you have students mark their work by writing the level of achievement, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, in the margin. Because then what you do is at parent-teacher time, you bring the student workbook to the parent-teacher interview and you flick through and you look at how students are going, so you can track and look for patterns. Are they consistently 3-star? Do they need pushing? Are they consistently a 1-star or struggling with the 1-star? That's really going to help open up conversations between you and the parent that can help the parent support students at home, but also help you work more effectively with the student in the class. So as a reminder, within this lecture we looked at WALTs and WILFs, or learning intent success criteria, and we had a look at some learning intent success criteria. Don't be afraid to bring this up in labs if you would like a bit more practice at writing these two things. Thank you very much.